Hi, this is Ron Ball. I am so excited to welcome you back to Choose Greatness, your key to a happier, greater life. We are having the best time on this show. This is a program geared for you. It's intended to help you have a great life for the glory of God. God loves you so much. He wants to abundantly bless you. One of my favorite verses, which I have repeatedly used on this program, is John 10:10, that Jesus came to give us life, give you life, and give it more abundantly. God does not want you to wallow in misery. He wants to bring you blessing, and He wants to bring you a better life. So we're going to learn together how that can happen for you, your children, your grandchildren, your marriage, your personal situation. Wow, I'm excited. I know you are. So go and tell as many people as possible about this program. I want you to call right now, text people, use social media, whatever you need to do. Get them to tune in quickly right now. Tell them Choose Greatness is on the air. Now, you heard in our last two programs from my friend Carolyn, who did a beautiful job. She was a great interview subject. She gave us terrific information, and she sang, my goodness, beautifully. And so many of you were thrilled to see her back on the show. Well, she has made numerous references to her hunk of a husband, Sean. So Sean is going to be with us today. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're delighted to have you. This is absolutely great. So this is Carolyn and Sean, not just Carolyn. You've heard her mention him so many times. Well, here he is. And you know, Sean, Carolyn has told this version of the story. I've heard her tell it about how you pursued her and met her. I want to hear your version of it. All right, tell the audience how you
just how I wrote it, honey.
Yeah, how you discovered her.
Take it from the Q notes. Okay. Well, I have to tell you, it was a weekend at a business function in Oregon, and I had made a promise to God that I was done dating. I was going to focus on the Lord and that relationship. And as God has a sense of humor, absolutely. The weekend I was at the function, I saw her and was struck deeply in my spirit. I knew God was doing something. And anyways, I left. I went back to Tennessee where I was living. And long story short, the Lord connected us through an individual that worked for the function there. And I knew after 2.5 months of talking with her on the phone that I was either that this was going to be my wife, or she was going to be a best friend of mine for life. So absolutely.
He actually even said that to me on one of our first courting times. He says, I'm going to tell you my intentions. And I love it. I tell girls this all the time now. A true godly man will tell you his intentions. It's not a game for them. You're just not to be another notch on their belt. He said, I'm going to tell you my intentions. I'm going to pursue you till you either marry me or you kick me out.
So you responded to that.
Well, I did, because, the woman inside you, I'd made my list of 80 things I was looking for in a mate.
Hey, say that again.
80. I had made a list of what I was looking for because I didn't want to settle. I'd already settled so many times before in my life, and it led to pain. And I'm like, I'm not doing that again. I'm going to make my list of what my hopes are, what my dreams are, what my prayer list is, and I'm going to give it to God. And everybody said, Carolyn, you're never going to find somebody like that. I said, you're right. Because my Bible tells me that a man findeth a good thing. I said, he's going to come find me. And at that point, Ron, I said, I want to be pursued. I don't want somebody who's intimidated by me, that I have to go and play some game and have to sway him. I want him to pursue me and to be my leader.
Hey, Sean, when did you know about the list, the 80 things? When did you know that?
Oh, my gosh. Well, that was several months into our getting to know each other.
Yeah.
But, I think I've done all right.
When you found out she had a list, what did you think? What was your first reaction?
Oh, there's no way I could measure up to that list. There's no way. Yeah, it's going to have to be God.
How did he do, Carolyn?
Oh, you know what? God doesn't take anything for granted. He really doesn't. He cares about everything. And, I remember asking God one day, I'm like, I know that there is great guys who I'm also going to be attracted to, because I don't care what anybody says in marriage. One of the number one things I wanted was somebody that was godly, but I wanted somebody I was attracted to, And so many times you get these
You're
going to
spend a lot of time together.
You're going to spend a lot of time together. And we talk about that a lot. You have to have an attraction, let alone a spiritual connection. And I just prayed and said, God, please. And But I didn't. That's all I put on the list. And let me tell you, when I opened up the door and saw his spirit and got to know his heart, he's even more beautiful than he even. No, he is. He is just a godly man. He fears the Lord.
Now, when you got to know Carolyn, now, I'm not talking about when you saw her the first time, or you performing, or you were interested, or you were curious, or you thought this might lead to something. I'm talking about down the road, as you really began to know her as a person. What did you see in her?
Authenticity, which is amazing because during that period of time where I was, I felt like God had allowed me to pursue her. One of the biggest things that I felt in my spirit that God was telling me was that, Sean, you need to be real. This is about what I want for your life and what I want for this young lady's life. This is not about what you want. And I saw that in her. I saw authenticity, and that was fantastic because.
So that was an attraction.
It was a huge attraction. Yeah, she knew who she was, and she became the good thing that the Bible talked about that I was to pursue. And she always jokes about that. She says, my Bible tells me that I'm supposed to be the good thing, and my job is to become the good thing. And I'm to pursue that, and I did. I felt that wholeheartedly in my. And so when I went for the first time, and actually we met face to face after 2.5 months of being on the phone, talking and praying. We hadn't seen each other. We didn't even really know each other except for that relationship over the phone.
The phone was in the beginning.
Yeah, that was huge, and that's really a testimony in and of itself. There was no togetherness physically there as far as us being in the same room together. It was us learning to talk and communicate, us talking about what our hopes, dreams, and desires were. Children, all the things that matter to us, and a lot of prayer time. So when I actually got to spend some hours with her in her home state of Ohio and met her family, there was a point where I realized that God had released me. And that's what it was. And that's important for the guys to know that, hey guys, if you're listening to the word, if you're listening to God's voice in your life, in your spirit, there was a point where I realized God has released me for this, and I am allowed now. And it was so exciting. I was allowed to actually tell her, and in fact, I said it to her. I looked at her and I said, I have to tell you that I feel released to tell you that I'm going to pursue you till you either kick me out or you marry me. And I could just see the look on her face was like, what? But
now,
it was in the spirit.
How old were you in all this when you met
27.
her? 27.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been dating some. You weren't a kid.
I was in Nashville. I was a single guy from Seattle originally. Been in Nashville for 7 years. Was looking to move back to Seattle, but there came that critical point where I realized: am I living for myself or am I living for God? And
now,
that's
look at the first year you were married. Everybody has ups and downs and challenges. What were your biggest adjustments with each other? Either one could start with that. What were your biggest adjustments being married?
The first year was a hard year. Don't you think, honey?
Yeah, I think really just
that's okay.
I'm not. We're not fake. Remember, we're the authentic people.
I think just to put it plainly, for me, was just what the expectations were. Who's going to take the trash out? Things like that. What's expected for me to do around the house? What's expected for her to do? And things like that.
We had a great. It wasn't that our marriage was tough. We had some really big situations that we were dealing with. And honestly, if I'm being authentic, I was trying to make my husband change. I'm just telling you, for the women that's out there,
Doesn't that happen a lot?
It happens a lot. And and that was my battle. I had to lay it all down. I remember one day, and me, I'm just as real, and I'm sorry for everyone out there. I'm very real and raw. But I remember one day we were having a heavy discussion, and he looked at me and goes, I just have one question. When did God die and put you on the cross and put you on the throne? And I looked at him.
Who made you God?
He said, and I knew as soon as he said that, the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, do you hear what he's saying? And at that point, Ron, no, I'm telling you, because I was trying to make him change. I was trying to fit these molds.
You had been on your own for a while. You worked with your family.
I was 31 when I got married.
You were strong.
Yeah.
You were aggressive and successful, and you'd had to plow through a lot of stuff.
Stuff.
So you weren't used to sharing your life that intimately with someone.
Well, it wasn't even. That wasn't it was other situations. I mean, it was more complicated than that because I knew how to be a wife. And at that point, we had a great relationship and we had a great love.
Yeah.
And, I shouldn't say that our first year was bad. It's just that we had a lot of me having to change.
Outside circumstances that
outside
were
of circumstances.
imposing pressure and stress on us.
Yeah.
And we had to look
Did
at
that
each other.
pull you closer together?
Well,
absolutely.
it could have broke us apart because the enemy, I think, was trying to do that. But it was the one day when we finally ended up at a counselor's office just because we knew we were committed to each other. We knew we loved each other. We knew we didn't want to go anywhere, but we wanted to have a great marriage. See, we're not people who want to settle for anything in life. If I'm going to be married and he feels the same way, we want it to be great.
Now,
you just said something really powerful. I want everybody to focus on this. You said we were happy, committed to each other, wanted to be married, but we went to a counselor.
Right.
Because you wanted to get better. You wanted to improve. You wanted to. Now, the reason I think that's important for our audience to note is because a lot of people consider going to a counselor a sign of failure.
Or a sign of weakness.
But really, you were demonstrating intelligence by doing that.
Well,
that was actually helping you.
Let me tell you even worse than that. We went because I thought she was going to tell him what he was doing wrong. And I needed some backup. We needed an outside person.
So what happened?
You know what happened? We got in there and the woman looked at me and she was so awesome, so godly, to the point that I said, I will never go back to her again. I was so upset. But the Holy Spirit began to move. That's the importance of marrying godly people and marrying somebody who he wasn't willing to give. And I'm making this sound probably worse than what it is because I'm sort of dramatic that way. But she looked at me and she said, you are to leave and to cleave. And I come from a really, really close, tight family.
I know that.
And that was what the struggle was, is that I needed to leave being underneath their umbrella.
Right.
And I needed to come underneath his wing. And it was my changes that I needed to make. And I say that in all humility because sometimes we fight the very thing that's really trying to lead us to freedom and to the blessing. And I was fighting it and I was going back and forth. I knew what I needed to do. I was submissive. And when I say
you were
submissive,
trying to do it the biblical way.
Oh yeah, and we had a great marriage as far as that, and he's such an awesome, we have so much fun together.
Let me add something to that. You know, she's doing a great job of explaining how she needed to change and adjust in her own life. But for us men, and for me, it was a growing up period for me to go from a single young man to realizing there is a responsibility when I commit my life
Biggest in the world.
Taking care of a woman that I have pledged my life to in front of witnesses, in front of God, that I had to change. I mean, there was things that I needed to do according to God's, grand design of marriage, that I needed to step up. And honestly, I needed to be a man. And I have seen my wife speak at a lot of conferences around the country, and I have sat back behind the cameras and watched these ladies of any age, from teenagers to 70, and I have watched them break and cry and have issues when they're talking about their men that aren't doing what they need to do. I mean, the women can be submissive and they can do all that, but if the man is not trustworthy, if the man doesn't step forward and say, you know what, I have a responsibility to my wife to be what God called me to be. And a lot of times men are intimidated, men are afraid, men are emotional.
Or they want to prove themselves.
Or they want to prove themselves, or they let their pride and their ego get in the way and they're not going to change. I mean, I've been guilty of that and I've had to get over that. I've had to slay my flesh and say, you know what? My wife is I love what you said in one of your earlier shows. You went into your marriage with the mindset that your wife had pure, heartfelt motivations of love for you, that she was committed to you, that she wanted to serve you, and out of that base, you were able to make healthy decisions as the husband to move forward and get over your offenses. And I think there's a lot of, and me included, there's a lot of men who get hung up on offenses. They get the pride built up and they become a stone wall. And us men can rise up and become a stone wall really easy and fast. And it's like, but then nothing heals, nothing changes. And what happens is the poor wife begins to crumble and crush underneath that weight of non-communication.
Right.
And
right.
I had to learn to be the man that God called me to be for her, which was a lot of building her trust through my actions. I had to show her in different ways, through our finances, through taking care of the kids, through taking care of anything that we're called to do. And that's an important thing. So I want to throw that out there. Us men marry these godly women, and they're amazing, but we have our responsibility too.
Well, now give me an example of something you had to rise up to when you first got married. I mean, something that you had an area you had to grow up in. To give our audience an example of something.
Well, finances is always a big area. I do some teaching on finances, and to be able to say I'm going to take over the finances is one thing, but and you do find financial. I mean, it's not something where you control everything.
Right.
I thought, well, I need to take all this on and keep this from her, because that's my job, is to take on all the responsibility. But then I realized, no, actually what she needs is a whole lot of communication. But there was pain in that, Ron, right? Because if I communicate what's going on with the finances, all of a sudden, wow, she might have a comment about that. She might have an opinion about that.
She might have something to say.
And it might hurt. It might cause me to have to shift and adjust. But what I realize is that she's not out to hurt me. She's not out to damage me. She's not out to drive me in the ground and make me bad. Actually, what she's saying is, I need you to communicate, because that's how I heal. That's how I understand. That's how
I build my trust.
That's how I build my trust. And once I got that, boy, that was a huge load lifted off my shoulders. I thought, you know what? It's okay. I'm going to let her know what's going on, and everything's great. It might have been about small things. I mean, literally small things. But everything between our marriage was about a high level of communication, which built trust. And once I earned trust with my wife, it was everything. And the other thing, I'll give you another example: walking out, being out in public, being out in open. She had mentioned that you're naturally going to be attracted to different things. I'm incredibly attracted to my wife, but there's pretty women out there. And my job as I walked was to say, you know what? My focus is God. My focus is my wife. And I owe her that respect.
That's a decision.
That's a decision. First and foremost. It's not one I had to struggle with toughly, but I'm telling you, it's something that, if somebody walks by, my focus is here. What are you feeding, right? If I'm feeding that flesh desire of, whoa, look what looks pretty, all of a sudden you're going to start looking that way. But I was feeding, God has given me an amazing gift, a beautiful wife, an amazing life. I need to focus on these things. And she told me one time, she said, you don't really notice it, but I've watched you when we go into rooms, and she said, thank you for not
because
looking.
That was a demonstration of respect for her.
Yeah,
right.
And I built her trust in that.
You honored her.
Honoring her, that's right.
I heard Billy Graham say one time many years ago that he was with a group of men, and he said, and these were Christian men, but he said there were a lot of women circulating, very attractive women in this particular place where Graham was, and he referred to these men, and I've never heard anybody else use this phrase ever, but he referred to these men as having elevator eyes. Now, what he meant was they're up and down, every woman looking, really watching them, really up and down, really looking at their body. They had elevator eyes. And Graham said he watched these men, and he said these were some of the spiritual leaders he was involved with in that community, and he thought, could that be the beginning of a problem if they don't control that?
Well, and we talk about that a lot because we have a lot of friends there, and that was one of the things I put on my list, is I didn't want a man that had a wandering eye, because growing up in ministry, you hear a lot of the not so good marriages and what happened, and then I watched those men, and I remember as a little girl, I'd sit and watch everything and think, I don't want that. That's a character flaw. That's because that's something inside that. And I just really appreciate him, because it builds my trust with him. And I tell you, it's something about the intimacy. I want to really hit that. I see a lot of women that it starts decreasing the intimacy because the wife feels compared, and the man wonders what the problem is, but she doesn't feel honored. She doesn't feel cherished. It comes back. It's a breakdown. And so because you keep that so covered, and so I feel so cherished all the time. I feel totally like I am the apple of his eye, and I tell him it all the time. He makes me feel like the most beautiful, the most awesome, the sweetest. I mean, he just looked at me just 2 days ago, and he said, you know how to bring the man out in me.
What a great thing to say.
I just teared up. I said, you have no idea.
From what you're saying, are you making the point that what he says to you matters? His words?
Well, his words matter, but his actions better back his word, because we live in a society today that, no lie, words are cheap. Yeah. We're looking to see how people live. You can say one thing to me and turn around and stab me in the back. That's real life. But when I can see that your words and your actions match up, it just does something. It builds the intimacy inside your marriage, the trust,
So
the
you
love.
both are actually saying that the core of a great relationship, and this is Choose Greatness, the core of a great relationship is trust.
Absolutely.
I think so.
Trust. And you want to be
Absolutely.
trustworthy. That's a
Right.
word I've always loved.
Right.
Trustworthy means worthy of trust.
Right.
Dependability, reliability. You don't worry about him when he's out somewhere. You don't worry about her. You trust each other, which means that that's your foundation. Am I right?
Absolutely.
And we don't play
Absolutely.
around with those games.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't sit there and try to come back, and making sure that men are looking at me and, making sure, oh, this guy hit on me today. We don't even live in that world because our focus is each other.
Right.
What did I do today to fill his love tank? I mean, we're a
Add to
bank.
that. That's a great lead in. I mean, basically, it's about service. I mean, how much are you serving each other? My pastor in Nashville at one point did a series, and it stuck in my head when he said, marriage is not a 50-50. It's 100%, 100%.
Totally
Both
agree
of you
with him.
serving the other person 100%. Are you able to care
it's not a
for
business
your
deal.
spouse more than she's caring for you? I mean, if you want to be competitive, compete in that arena. I mean, outserve each other and see what happens in your marriage. It'll blow your mind.
Well, on the previous program, and I think you were in the studio watching when we did the program previously where Carolyn sang the beautiful song about brokenness and beauty and healing. One of the things that we looked at in that program, you'll remember this, is this whole idea of victimization and victimhood. If you consider yourself a victim, then you're always blaming the other person for your unhappiness.
Right.
It's always his fault. It's always her fault. And when you blame somebody else for your unhappiness, that automatically cuts you off from truth. So you're never going to heal.
That's
you're never
right.
going to improve.
That's right.
Because you have to take responsibility for who you are.
Let me add something else that just came into my mind when you were saying that. You're talking about entitlement.
Yes.
If I came into my marriage with a sense of entitlement, like God gave me my wife, this is what I deserve, I'm in trouble, Ron. That takes away the whole concept of serving somebody else.
Right.
And isn't that what Jesus did? He came to serve. He didn't come to be served. And, I think for us men, we need to rise up in this country. I mean, I did a men's group months ago called Men Stepping Up. It's a Dennis Rainey program. And it was amazing, the response.
From men.
Of the men realizing the concept, like a stair step, that you're stepping up to different levels of responsibility within your, you want to leave a legacy in your family, and some men are just thinking about, can I survive tomorrow in my marriage? Well, here's how you start. You start communicating. You drop the pride. You get open. You start being honest. You start earning trust. You start serving. It sounds, some men are going to be like, oh, that's not manly. Let me tell you something. It takes a real man to dig in, roll your sleeves up and say, you know what? I'm going to put my pride on the shelf, and I'm going to look at my wife and my children and anybody in my family as they're under my care, and it's my responsibility, and I need to find out what their needs are. And that's emotional needs. That's,
Spiritual.
obviously, the physical covering needs of food, shelter, clothing, things like that, but spiritual needs, I mean,
Well, let me
it's
ask you
big
a
job.
question, Sean. You obviously have a desire in your heart, in your spirit, to be a godly man and a godly
Absolutely.
leader.
Absolutely.
And we know there's a big difference between being a leader and being a dictator,
Yeah.
a dominator, a destroyer. A leader leads, doesn't dominate. So since you want that, what do you need most from Carolyn to help you fulfill your role as a leader?
Wow, that's a great question. Never really been directly asked that. So, I mean, honestly,
Well, now
I
you're going to
need
answer
her-
in front of millions of people.
I need her to just, and this is gonna, I don't want to, wasn't raised in a church home. So everybody who's listening needs to understand, I didn't come from a church background. So I found Christ in an authentic way. So what I'm saying is not an unmanly statement. This is straight out of the box. I need her to focus on a relationship with Christ. I need her to become a godly woman, because I know it's a survival link for me, that the way that I change is to hang on to that vine with a relationship with Christ and all that that entails. And I know if she is drawing from that vine,
Who is Christ?
who is Christ, then I know that, like you said, you can trust her base of motivation that she's coming from. She's coming from a base of wanting to serve, wanting to love, wanting to be honoring, wanting to be my partner. I need her to be my partner. You know, like God called a helpmate. I need that. And you know, that's the number one thing that I need from her.
And I think he tells me all the time, I'm a great partner. What he does a great job about is helping our family get our vision down.
He edifies you.
Well, he edifies me. I'm not this man. He honors me. He cherishes me. I can tell you that I feel loved. I feel loved.
Greatest
I
compliment
feel
I could ever get.
celebrated from this man.
Amen.
But he does a great job of leading our family to find our vision. And then we pull together. The dictatorship doesn't happen because then we pull together of what each one of our jobs are. Even our children to be a part of the team of making that vision a reality.
Well, based on what you just said, I want to say something to all of you watching. If you're a woman, I know sometimes you become very anxious and worried and frustrated, and you try to pressure and push your husband into becoming the godly man you want him to be. Well, that will not work. He does not respond to pressure. He responds to encouragement and respect and love. You want to build him up and never, ever tear him down. Don't ever criticize him in front of your children. Don't ever do that. Don't ever tear him down in front of somebody else. Be the woman who is his biggest cheerleader, his biggest supporter, and his biggest encourager. Now, I want to do something I did not plan to do. And I want to alert our team at the studio that I'm about to do something unplanned, and we'll have to just make a preparation for this. I want to encourage you to go to the website that supports this program, choosegreatness.com. And I always promote the book, Choose Greatness, because that's the introduction to the greatness that you need. You need that book, very simple, written for all ages. But I want to add another resource, a powerful resource that is relatively new. It's an audio series called Your Best Family Now. It's all new information. It's how we reared our kids. My daughter's the state treasurer of Kentucky. My son's in law school. They're godly people. They're tremendous in success. Well, I want to teach you this in that series. So get Your Best Family Now. Do it today. So God bless you and choose greatness.